Det var ikke jeg! Jeg sier, det var ikke jeg! Det var ikke jeg, sier jeg! Det var ikke jeg! Pappa mi, mora mi. Vi alle ville penger til skole og sykepleier. But instead, we got this, right? Instead, we got this, okay? So I'm here, guys, to apologize. As a Norwegian, I want to apologize. As a Norsk, I want to apologize for the worst game ever made. Because it was paid right by, of course, the Norwegian government. Vi beklager at vi har laget det verste spill ever. This is sad, right? It's sad. No one actually wanted this game made, right? Because no one actually out in Norway wants this game, like seriously, right? And just generally speaking here, no one in Norway actually wants the government to pay for this cultural installment of greatness. So in this video, I'm not gonna cover why Dustborn is the worst game ever. I feel there are so many other YouTubers doing exactly that, right? Instead, we're gonna focus on Norske staten. I'm gonna explain to you, right, why is this game being paid and, you know, produced basically by the Norwegian government, right? And also how there's like a general issue overall in Scandinavia. So press the like button, press the subscribe button, whatever, right? But again, I'm trying here to, at least I feel, making another kind of video than just complaining about that Dustborn is woke, which of course is the biggest wokest failure ever of mankind or whatever. But again, I feel everyone already knows that. For example, did you know that this game is released to Windows PC, and actually the word Windows is a Norwegian word, vindu. So vindu is actually where the word window comes from. So I guess we Norwegian people here, we have, I don't know, foreshadowed this game being made for many, many years. I don't know anyone that works at this company per se, but I do know a lot of people that actually have worked with this director. He's from Funcom primarily. Funcom is by far the most recognized like video game company in Norway, and it feels like anyone that has been working with the video game industry in Norway has basically worked at Funcom or knows someone at Funcom or been back and forth here, and they have made games like Age of Conan and so on. So they're by far the biggest video game producer company, publisher, whatever in Norway, and all this stuff back and forth between different years. But so basically, it's, you know, Norway isn't a big country, and it doesn't have that many game studios. So I don't know this person like directly, but I know people that know him very well. So I have some insider info as well, I suppose. But before we get into that, let's briefly say, right, that this game is just insanely, absurdly woke. You don't have to really cover it as much, I feel, because again, it's already been so heavily thought about, right? But I would say briefly is that immediately the game has this intro song, which is just straight up racism. Honestly, right? It's not woke, or I guess you could argue it's woke, but I think this game is just the worst thing I've seen in my life, because the song goes like, "You are gonna be extinct." When I say that, I genuinely think that the opening to Dustborn might be the worst video game soundtrack music, whatever you call it, ever. Like seriously, ever. The song goes like, "We are gonna kill you and make you extinct." So they are basically like pro-genocide. And, you know, the whole idea is that it's woke, it's anti-Trump or whatever, right? And we should, you know, respect immigrants or whatever. That's the point of the game developer. But this song literally is like, "We are gonna kill your kind and you're gonna be extinct." So this song is like a little threat from the immigrants saying that we're gonna kill the original native population. So it's completely exactly what, of course, a Trump voter would be afraid of. Song ergo makes zero sense, right? And then they all sing like, "We are born, we are newborn," and it's just the weirdest, cringy song ever. It's genuinely. So now let me explain why the game is basically paid by Norwegian tax money. The reason why is that they have this thing called NF here, right? Norsk. It's like Norwegian Movie Institution. So, yeah, something like that. Or Kino. Movie, it's Kino, right? And you can see here on the website, they are like, you know, talking about different movies being made and so on, and etc. They're giving money to different projects. Right? The thing is that this is a governmental system, and basically what they do, right, is that they will give out money for free, basically, actually, for free, to different companies that want to produce culture, so to speak, right? Of course, traditionally, this has been for movies, as it's called, like, you know, Norwegian Movie Institution, right? but they also then started giving out money to game companies, right? And this is something that is very, very common in generally Scandinavia, Nordic countries. So as a kid, let me tell you, this is the worst thing ever, okay? As a kid, growing up, right, going to Norwegian, I grew up in Norway and Sweden, and in the schools in Norway and Sweden, you would have to watch these movies every year, because the government basically pays for them, right? So they get the movies for free, and then you have to watch them, and all the movies, of course, have a message, right? More or less, right? They're all incredibly cringe, badly acted, and just the reason they're so bad is because most people that even make these movies, they can't get a real acting job. I mean, like, they can't get, a capitalist acting job where like mainstream and make good movies. So they're only the most cringy, weirdest movies usually get made by this government thing, which of course makes sense, because the government making movies is probably not going to be very good, probably very propagandic. And honestly, as a kid growing up with this thing, I hated it. Everyone hated it. All of my classmates every year, we all hated every movie that this government would create, right? Because they were so cringy and so bad, whatever. And they were also, of course, very extremely woke. We used to call it PK back in the days, political correctness, yeah, not political correctness. But basically, right, that this movie institution, that this government institution, would make really cringy woke games instead of making really cringy woke movies. To me, then, growing up with this thing, is of course zero surprise. It's like, yeah, this is exactly what I remember as a kid. So this is, I mean, if anything, it's just more left, I guess, but it's just more cringe than it used to be. But it really is a big issue that this institution, and similar than in other countries like Denmark, Sweden, or whatever, they all have the exact same issue, that they will basically only give money, right, to the cringiest ideas. Because think about it, right? These people can't get money by doing actual movies people want to see, right? They have too far crazy ideas, so no one wants to pay for that, and no one actually hires them, right, in a normal industry. So you go to the government and say, I have this really crazy idea, and the government is like, no, it's like really, it's perfect for your political whatever agenda, right? They're like, okay, let's do that. So it's like they're the only people that basically gets produce these movies, and you get stuck with the worst kind of movies. But seriously, as a kid, we were forced to watch these movies. It's like 2-3 per year, yeah. And you rather just, I mean, I was a good student, so I rather just go to math class or whatever. Can I just learn math instead? That really is the experience, right? You see an episode of Simpson where Lisa, they have this like gender thing in Simpson, and Lisa's like, feel math over there. She's like, can I just learn math instead? Yeah. And she's just like, I don't want to have this woke stuff. Can I just go and learn math? I don't need to be like emotionally ready for math. I just want to learn math, That honestly is the experience watching these movies as a kid. Because you're like, I rather just study something than having to be force-fed this stuff. And honestly, the worst thing with them isn't that they are, again, woke or whatever, is that they are just really low quality, right? These are basically always the worst actors in the country that do stuff. Yeah, these are like the lowest quality actors, lowest quality directors. And honestly, the game is more or less the same, right? Of course, it's going to be the lowest quality developers, the lowest quality coders working on a game. We have to be paid by the government to do it. Yeah, it's probably going to be pretty meh, let's be honest here. The Norwegian government's defense, though, there's actually a very interesting backstory here to why I believe that Dustborn even got finding to begin with. Right? Like, how did this American, so to speak, Trumpian idea, right, come into, because actually Dustborn is very, very different than the previous game made by this developer in Norway. How did it happen? Well, here's the kicker, right? So, you see, this game here is called Dreamfall, or then Dreamfall. They made this game on PC, and why it's not a very popular game, very good game, whatever, it's very Norwegian, right? It's actually voiced in Norwegian, okay? They actually speak in Norsk tunge, and so on, right? And this game then is very popular, right, among the culture people, right? Because this is a game seen as a Norwegian cultural game. Draugen, the game they made before Dustborn, was also paid by the Norwegian government, the same institution. And this game, of course, is very Norwegian focused. So when they were going to pitch Dustborn, according to my sources that know this developer, Red Thread Games, and director personally, and I trust people, allegedly, this game was a complete scam, actually, against the Norwegian government. Again, allegedly, I haven't evidence for this thing, but to me, it actually sounds quite believable, Because all the previous game that Red Thread Games have made have been about Norwegian culture, making the game right in Norwegian language, right? And then suddenly it took this a massive turn, right, to make it super woke in America, anti-Trump, refugees, others, like this is completely detached, right, from the previous games. So what I've heard at least, right, from people I know in Norway, in the Norwegian game industry, is that this game in the beginning was pitched as still being in Norwegian, right, at least in language-wise and so on. So it's supposed to be like Norwegian characters or whatever, but it really isn't. So honestly, in the government's defense here, Norsk Statens defense here, they might actually been tricked and scammed by the company. Of course, when I say that, I don't mean that they can sue them back or whatever, because usually how this thing works is that, you know, someone in the government agrees to pay the money, and then have some kind of criteriums, or the game has to be maybe vocal, whatever it has a criterium. But yeah, very likely they probably don't have a contract that's like literally, if you don't make this game about Norwegian people, the game is bad or whatever. Yeah, they probably don't have that, so they probably can't get the money back. But what I've heard at least, and I researched this now for the last few days, but some people read some stuff and so on, it honestly really looks like that this company, you know, they kind of sold the government on like, oh, we're gonna make another, you know, Norwegian cultural game, right? But like I said earlier, growing up, right, watching these Norwegian movies made by the government or paid by the government, and also in Sweden and so on, again, they usually had a focus on local stuff, right? I remember in Sweden, we'd always watch these like really terrible movies about small villages in Sweden, like this like Åmål and so on, like the small little, like, you know, side cities that no one cared about, right? Those kind of movies would be made, like, you know, someone living in a small village, and so this to me is really far-fetched actually. And I'm not saying that I know this is a fact or not. I just heard it from a source I trust, but it does to me makes a lot of logical sense, right? Because it's like, yeah, this game really is a massive move from your previous games, and not saying that their ideology has changed. These developers that I've heard of, people, I mean, I said I know people know him, right, and other people there, I've heard that they are super left-leaning, woke, whatever you call it, right? And that has always probably been the case, of course, when the previous games were also whatever, right? But they at least took place in Norway, you know what I mean? They were Norwegian culture-based games, and this game, of course, isn't. It's American-based, right? So that is actually quite a big difference there. If you work for the culture ministry in Norway, you're probably going to be left-wing, or basically all of you in there are left-leaning, right? And you don't really need to explain it more than that, but that's just how it is, right? That's how it is. In, for example, Sweden, you have what's called SVT, Swedish Television. They're like BBC, right? They're paid by the government and so on. They're supposed to be unbiased, but everyone knows they're incredibly left-leaning biased, right? So they did this research on people working at SVT, and this showed that everyone hired to work there for, I don't know, for many years, but currently that year then, were all left-leaning voters, right? So literally 100% people working at SVT supposed to be unbiased, for all voting for the left, right? And this is a massive issue, because what that means is that even if I don't think that people at SVT are extremely left-leaning, so I don't think they are that. However, let's say that 10% or 20% are extremely left-leaning, what we call woke, right? And the other 80% are just like left. There's left. There's no one, literally no one is right-leaning at all at Swedish television or Swedish culture stuff at all in the government. Like 0%, like 100%. 100% are left. So they're either extreme left or they are just left, right? So when the extreme left people want to make an extremely woke video game, a spill that everyone's going to hate in the actual, you know, consumer, but they want to make it, right? Those other 80% are not going to say no. They're going to be like, yeah, it makes sense, right? So that's kind of how it is, right? In most of, it's all of the Scandinavian, Finland, Denmark, Iceland, yeah. All of the 5 like Nordic countries have this exact issue where they have them huge amount of basically only 100% left-leaning people working for the culture ministry, right, or culture media, whatever. And they, of course, they're only going to give money then to extremely left-leaning game companies, right? Then, of course, the second thing is that Norway is rich, right? A very rich country, very high welfare, a lot of welfare benefits or whatever you want, and of course the oil, right? Mostly based on oil, but also, you know, free education, free healthcare and so on, right? Which means that the government in itself has a lot of money to give out to like crazy culture projects, right? And again, then everyone in the government that decides who's gonna get the money or not are basically all left-leaning. Doesn't mean that the whole government is left-leaning, I don't think so at all, but it's more like people working for this specific place, the culture ministry, movie ministry, they're all gonna be left-leaning, because they're very culture people, right? Where the military or the scientists are basically all right-leaning instead. So it's very much like that, right? So of course all the money goes to these like super crazy vogue games. It's kind of like, honestly, it's pretty obvious thing about it, right? Just in general, people in Scandinavia, they don't want the government anymore to, you know, like give money to this random crazy culture ideas, right? Because Norway also builds really dumb statues, also pay for really dumb music, also pays for, again, then really bad movies, right? And honestly, these movies are not much better in this game, right? And I guess tax money also pays for like one of the worst games ever made. So no one wants this. But I talk to any Norwegian person that I know, Mora me, Papa me, whatever, old co-workers, all that. No one actually wants to pay for this game, right? And not this game, but basically 99% of Norwegians doesn't want the culture people to have any money at all. Not just for this game, but for anything. To make dumb statues or dumb music and so on. Yeah, all that stuff. Everyone wants the tax money to go to, like, seriously, you know, education, healthcare, like actual stuff, right? Maybe have better education for the kids, something, yeah. No one actually wants money to go to these cultural ideas, right? And that is the same for Sweden and Denmark and other Finnish people. No one actually wants money to go to these crazy art projects. And to me, I think it also makes sense no one wants that. It's ignoring the whole concept of like, oh, this is vocal PC, left to right, whatever. It's because like the government very rarely makes good culture, right, you know, because it's forced, you know. And the thing is that I think a general issue why people are against this, and this is not just for this game. I'm talking my whole life, basically. My whole life, everyone I knew, my parents, everyone I knew, grandparents, everyone has always been against this thing. Yeah, all these movies and so on. Yeah, always. So it's not just this game, right? And the reason why, of course, I think in a primary reason is because this is never what people want, right? You know, like I said earlier in the video, these movies are terrible. They have never made like a good movie with, you know, tax money, basically, like forced induced tax money to make a movie. That's never worked, basically, right? Because you're like, no, but if the movie is great, the movie is gonna be able to stand on its own legs, on its own merit, right? If the video game is good enough, it's gonna be able to sell on its own merit. Maybe not always, but most of the time, you know, products based on merit will sell, right? Or whatever it is. Ideas on merit will actually work. So when the government is like forcing people to have money to build dumb stuff, because usually this thing always turns out like this. They will have really weird statues, you know, of like bleeding lady parts on the walls or whatever. You know, but this is basically what it always becomes. Yeah, it always becomes like really, really weird, super cringe stuff that no one actually wants to see or pay for, right? So that's why, again, I was surprised this game exists, and this game is like the worst game ever, because this is basically the video game version of, you know, bleeding vajayjays on the walls in a museum, right? You know what I mean? This is the exact same thing, yeah. This is like the exact same level of terrible government-founded fake culture that no one in the actual country of Norway actually wants to watch, you know, or play that in this game. Don't forget, though, that even if the previous game weren't that amazing, at least those games, right, were focused on Norwegian culture, right? They were in Norwegian language, they had Norwegian voice acting, and again, they were the best games ever, but at least some people actually wanted to play like Draugen, because, you know, it was like Viking lore, it was like mythology of Norway, it was the fjords, whatever, right? So that was like, okay, I can play this game. It's not the best game from a game mechanic standpoint or graphics or whatever, but it has that value of being, you know, like my culture, so I can enjoy it a little extra because it's about my ancestor or whatever, right? So that had some value to it. And actually, I still am against the government paying for these terrible games, but at least it's like I can understand, right, why the government wants to pay for that thing. So I do think there is some relevance to the whole idea that this game isn't what the government wanted either. Actually, in the government's defense, they probably actually genuinely, I think so honestly, I think the government probably believed they were gonna get, you know, like woke Vikings or something, which sounds still terrible, but at least it's gonna be like Vikings or dragons. It's gonna be something in like, you know, Norway or like generally Scandinavia. That's at least what they probably believed in. And then they got this thing, like a road trip in America. So honestly, they are probably not that happy either. I think so, no. Anyway, try the video, guys, subscribe, press the like button.